The band of the day today is the Black Keys, brought to you by Live Nation. For all the live concerts and events in 2024, check out livenation.com. DJ PK, it's 97.5 The Zone. It's time to welcome Steve Cleveland back to the show. Steve, good morning.
Morning, guys.
Wow, we are right in your wheelhouse now, aren't we? BYU needs a basketball coach. How many people can talk intelligently about that and say, I did it. I sat in that chair, in that office, and on that sideline. Here's what you need. And I know things have changed. Transfers and NIL, the game's always evolving, so it's different. But some things don't change. So if Tom Homo calls you and says, give me a little advice, you got something I need to look for that I might be overlooking, what might that be if you got to ask that question?
Well, I think whether it's Tom Homo or whoever, I think you should be asking questions. And I think that, there's a list of candidates that are kind of out there publicly that we can have a conversation about. But I think if I'm an athletic director, I want to know everything I can about that individual, their family, where they're from. And most of these candidates, most of the community are familiar with because they have ties to BYU or they were here coaching in the community. But I don't think there's anything more important than talking about the individual, their character, their integrity, their where they at, finding out everything you can about that individual, how they got along with guys. If I was an AD, I'd be, obviously you've got a pool of guys that are here already that are in a staff, and then you have others that you're looking at. But I don't think at this point in time, as important as it is, you don't want to leave one stone unturned. And I'm not saying doing it in any kind of a negative light. It's just, here's the things you need to know and what you're comfortable with. And whether it's the family moving and making a big change to you being a part of the staff already, or maybe at one time you were part of the staff, all of those questions have to be asked. And it's not as simple as it might seem to the fan that, oh, yeah, this is the guy that should be the coach, because there's just a lot of underlying things that you need to be aware of. And a good AD like Tom Homo and all the people that are working with him, I'm sure Brian Santiago is very involved with him in this as well, that they need to be careful and just just pay attention to the details and making sure that everybody feels good about this. And I don't think it's rocket science. We'll probably talk about a little bit about it today, but you also have a number of young men that are sitting there wondering. Some of them put their names in portals, and so there's a lot of unknown. The quicker they do this, the better it'll be. I mean, if they're waiting much more than another day or two, it just allows these young people to kind of be wondering where they're going, and all of a sudden, players start leaving. I don't think that a young man or a player that's in a portal necessarily means they're going to leave. I think what it means is, hey, I don't know what's going on here. I better protect myself. I better be concerned about my NIL issues, where we're at there. If you're the player in the program right now, ask all those questions. I'm absolutely confident in Tom and Brian and making this decision and doing it in a timely manner so that they can move on and kind of rebuild the team again.
Yeah, I 100% believe it will be done later in the week. I've been told that, and I think that's what will happen for those very reasons that you just said. I wanted to talk about a couple of candidates. They don't really have what we would consider a quote-unquote BYU guy in the manner that Kalani Sitake was a BYU guy. There just isn't anybody out there who fits that, not requirement, but just fits that criteria, I guess. But you look at, I think, in my mind, it's two guys in particular. It is Chris Burgess and Barrett Peary, who's an assistant at UNLV, has been a head coach and also has been in the coaching business for a good long time. And then I think Quincy Lewis will get a look. And so you look at those two guys as leaders, and I think people are a little vulnerable right now because Mark Pope left them. But Mark Pope, whether it was after 1 year or after 5 years, if the Kentucky job came open, he was going to take it. And if he had an opportunity, and that was just always going to happen. So you have to get over that. And I go of the Chris Hill mindset. I hire coaches who are going to be really good for our programs. And he did it in the two high-profile sports. He hired Majerus, who flirted with every job every year, and I think a lot of it was because he didn't have a family and he was bored, and that gave him something to do. And he stayed there for a number of years, and now obviously they have incredible success. And then he did it with Urban Meyer. The day Urban Meyer took the job, he was out the door. It was just a matter of when. But Urban Meyer, in just 2 seasons, brought them incredible levels of success. And then you deal with it. And then they hired Whittingham, who was a Utah guy, and he's been there for 20 years. So that worked, right? You look at Burgess. He's perceived as not being a BYU guy. I think that's a little bit of a misnomer because he was coming out of high school. Duke was the program, and everyone had stars in their eyes when you see Duke. And then when he transferred to Utah, you were just building the program, and you hadn't established to the level that you got it and all that stuff. So that stuff was somewhat not fair in the manner of, well, he's a Utah guy, and then he takes the job at Utah as an assistant because he got a big raise. But he has some BYU family background. Perry has moved around. I think you go with which one you decide, you go with that, even if they're not the quote-unquote BYU guy, because they're the best guy for the job in the moment, and that's what really matters.
I completely agree with you. I know everybody on this list, and I'm not here to give, I can tell you a little bit about each one. I will just say this about Chris. I've gotten to know Chris over the years when he was at BYU and just having his brother in our program and just a variety of things. The things that I really like about Chris is, now I'm going to talk about recruiting. Here's a guy that has played at the highest level in college. He's been a guy that's been in the, professionally played basketball. He's got a great family here in the community. He obviously was on that staff at BYU, and it may not have been a perfect world for him, but I have the utmost respect for him. I mean, when you're looking at someone that kind of checks the boxes, in terms of fan base, terms of an AD, he checks a lot of the boxes just because of all the experiences that he has. And like I haven't talked to Barrett lately, but I mean, every one of those guys, other than Matson, who's going to be staying at Cal, they're all great coaches, all really, really good human beings. But I think a side note here is recruiting is a huge thing. And to have someone that has a national prominence, that has played at every level and has had success, I see that as being something that why an AD would hire Chris Burgess. Besides the fact he's a great human being, he's got a great family, they've been in this community for a long time. I think the transition would be pretty simple. He worked on the staff with Mark, and I know there were some issues there for a bit, and Chris decided to leave. But at the end of the day, in my mind, Chris Burgess is a guy that could step in and there's lots to do and figure out, but I think that transition will be pretty smooth. Barrett Perry is a young man. I call him a young man because I've always looked at him as a young man to me, but he has had such a plethora of experiences as an assistant, as a head coach, nothing at a real significant level, but again, he's somebody that has been prepared for this, and he's been in programs that had a variety of different styles. I'm quite certain that if Barrett were being interviewing today, he'd talk about the plan that he has and how he would do things, and that would be a compilation of all the experiences he had as an assistant, as a head coach, all the things that he's done. He's not a name that's going to be real well known to the fan base, but they've hired people like that before that nobody knew, and Barrett's plenty capable, has the capacity, knows everything about BYU, and he's another guy. I know that Nick Robinson and that staff, I know that I've heard that he has an interest, and again, he has a different background in terms of how he got to BYU, playing at Stanford. And then Quincy, in my mind, I don't know that Quincy is the direction they would go, but I don't know that there's a better basketball coach in this state at the high school level or ever has been than him. And I mean, Quincy is just such a solid human being. I don't think it would be a hard transition for him. I think it would be overwhelming for him a little bit. But he's been on a staff. He was on Dave's staff for a number of years. That transition, I don't know if they go with someone of that nature. But if you're asking me if I can have somebody coach my grandchildren, it'd be Quincy Lewis. That's how much respect I have for him. I'll come back to the fact that my gut feeling tells me that what BYU needs right now probably more is a Chris Burgess than a Quincy Lewis or a Barrett Perry. But I tell you what, if any of those guys were hired, they'd have my full support, and I'd have complete confidence in what they've done just because of the vast experiences. I know when people out in the world are saying, we're not going to hire a high school basketball coach. Well, you know what? A lot of guys that are coaching Division I, and Quincy's had a lot of experience as an assistant coach at the Division I level. I don't think that transition would be that as difficult for him. It may be more difficult for the fans to digest, but it doesn't mean anything. At the end of the day, you're trying to get the best person to do the best job and go get some of these guys out of the portal and bring them back and be passionate about it. And I think that's the number one thing. Get a staff and get everybody back in place. And if the guys are going to go to Kentucky, they go to Kentucky, and then you move on. There's a great core in this team. And I think that Colin Chandler is a big piece to that. And I think if you don't know, that Colin Chandler had quite a great relationship with Chris. And the concern was 6 months ago that Colin Chandler may go to Utah because Chris had such a relationship with him. I don't know if that's true or not, but you are talking about a head coach who their number one recruit and a guy that's going to instantly come into this program. And as soon as he gets physically strong enough and healthy and is back in shape, he's going to be an impact guy for BYU for a number of years.
When it comes to hiring coaches, I think Chris Hill had a big impact on PK and I because he was willing to say things off microphone and away from the notebook if he knew they would stay out of the public sphere. And so you heard a lot of the logic of what went into why he did. And a lot of that logic worked. It didn't always work. Obviously, you had some basketball coaches. He wished, the hirings had gone a different way. But more worked than didn't. And so I'm wondering, and one thing he was very careful with is he really encouraged Urban Meyer to hire Kyle, but he didn't demand it. And I'm wondering how much Tom Holmoe should go to whoever it is. Let's say Burgess is the leading candidate. But if it's Barrett Perry, same thing, and say, I really want you to take a look at putting Quincy Lewis on the staff. Because there are a lot of people who have a lot of respect for what Quincy has done and who he is and how he handles people. But that, coming from a high school job to a college job, and the whole NIL transfer portal has changed a lot since he was there. But if you're on the staff, it would set you up for the next one because none of these people appear to be BYU lifers. And They're always going to be people who have a lot more money and who are better positioned to go to Sweet 16s and Final Fours and win national titles. So whoever takes it might leave. Personally, I don't think they should run scared from that. They hired a guy for 5 years. It went pretty well. The building's packed. The team's winning, and he got a chance to go to Kentucky. Great. That's the way it goes. So do you think they should really put an emphasis on bringing Quincy on board on the staff? Not make them, but strongly encourage whoever they give the job to.
I think that when you start looking at it, I think one, and Nick's in the program, and he has a relationship with all the guys, which is important. Chris may know a few of these guys from a few years back, but listen, I'm a huge Quincy Lewis fan, so you're kind of preaching to the choir here. And I don't even know if I haven't talked to Quincy in a while, and again, I just know him as a human being and as a wonderful coach. And if I wanted somebody to have a foundation, if it's something he's interested in, he'd be one of the first phone calls I make. Because he just knows this community. He's an outstanding coach. He's an X and O guy. It seems like that there are going to be a few changes with staff, and we'll kind of see how that all plays out. But if there's an opening there, I would love to see Quincy and Nick Robinson stay in the program because of their ties and because of the relationships they have and just the experiences they had. But whoever the head coach is, they're going to have impressions and they're going to have thoughts and feelings. But I love your thoughts on that because I feel the same way, and we'll see how it plays out. And being all of these people whom I have pretty good relationships with, you hate to say anything that would be harmful to any of them, because that's not my intent. My intent is for them to hire, Tom Homo and Brian and the administration to hire someone that's going to immediately have a positive impact on the program. And all this energy that they've got going in the Big 12 and all that momentum, that can be continued if you do this quickly, get the right guy. And, some of those people that are in a portal right now, I don't think Waterman's in the portal. Robinson, I've heard lots of things about him going to Kentucky, going to the league. I don't know. Saunders is another guy that's in the portal that I think really would love to stay at BYU, the right situation. You've got Nell coming back. I really am high on Dawson Baker, who was hurt last year. Dallin quickly put his name into the portal. I know he's got a great relationship with Coach, and he may well end up in Kentucky. But a guy like Traore, who's going to be a senior, even Atiki now is back on the page. I mean, he's been in that program long enough. I don't know the new guys, Isaac Davis and Brooks Barr. I know they're three-star type guys. They're not probably going to have an immediate impact, but I think Colin Chandler could. And I just think that you got Saunders and Colin Chandler and Dawson Baker and Nell. You're probably still needing a point guard if Dallin leaves, but there's a lot of guys out there, and a lot of, you can go get a couple of point guards and make that thing work. So, and I honestly, I think, I don't know how the head coach, what they'll run, but I always kind of like a really athletic point guard who break people down off the dribbling and just could attack, downhill, can attack off the ball screens. And listen, Dallin Hall is one of my very favorite people. I got to know him well when he lived as a missionary in Fresno. But if he's made that decision to leave, then, your highest priority is let's find one or two really athletic point guards that understand the system. That would be my first priority in terms of rebuilding this program after you get a staff. And they may not finish the staff immediately. I remember putting a staff together, and the first thing I did is I went to Hutchinson, Kansas to see what JUCO guys there were, because I was most comfortable that I'd been in that environment for so long. But the priorities will be certainly to get a staff put together as quickly as possible. But, once the decision is made who the coach is going to be, that whole transfer portal thing is going to be something you got to be on top of. And then now you also have, where is the NIL in all of this now? What have we learned? What has that administration learned about the NIL? What are the capacities? Does BYU have the capacity to raise $3 or $4 million for a basketball program? I don't have all those questions, but I don't know that you can just stay as you are in terms of financing the NIL and feel like it's going to just be okay and we're BYU. I don't think that works anymore. You're going to have to pay money. You're going to have to help get good guys in. And if you're not willing to really do that, then you're limiting yourself in terms of what your potential is and what the ceiling is for this program.
We know that BYU has different layers before a coach is announced. You went through it yourself more so than other schools. Could you take us through once they decide on a potential candidate, what they have to do beyond interviewing with the athletic director and maybe the president?
It was really. I had some really choice experiences with both Elder Perry and President Eyring. And I had ecclesiastical kind of interviews. And what's been interesting is that those two men were such a significant part of my life. And that's being called as a mission president, and President Eyring dedicating the temple in Indianapolis when we were there. And so I didn't know these men. I'm not sure I'd ever met a member of the 12 Apostles, but going up there, you're nervous. But they all had different. Elder Perry was an interesting guy. His philosophy was, I'd never forget this. He said, "I don't get it." I probably shouldn't be quoted because I'm out of context and I'll be getting a phone call from somebody. But at the end of the day, his heart was so good about loving basketball. I mean, I can't tell you. There are probably 20 or 30 times he came in the locker room and chastised me for not being positive after losses and this and that. But he was such a mentor to me. But he honestly in his heart believed that there was churches on every corner and basketball being a sport that's loved in Utah, that anything could ever go sideways with that sport in the state. And I could feel his passion for it. Where President Eyring it was a little bit different, but it was still, you're really nervous when you go in there. But I got really comfortable when I sat down there, and then I had a chance to see these brethren at other times as I coached there and when I left coaching. So it is different, but it's something that was really special for me. I never forget it. And I think, at that time when I met with him, I was pretty deep on the play. I was down at the bottom there. I don't think I was someone that they were even thinking about it. I didn't know them, and there were other candidates likely to get the job. But that ecclesiastical piece is real. And I had experiences at BYU that were really difficult for me with the honor code. And thank goodness a lot of that has changed. And it's just done with more insight and more compassion. But in the past, there were things that bothered me for a long time. It was really hard for me when you'd lose a player under circumstances and whatever the circumstance or situation was. And I'm not the only one that had that experience. Everyone does. But I do believe that what's happening in that institution is more inclusive now, whether you're members of the church or not, and that not everything's not black and white. Okay, that's not how the world works. It's not how you raise your kids. It's not what we do in any church. Is that we have compassion and we help work through those things. So that's a big part of it. I understand it much more than I did at the time, but it's still part of the really cool experience that I saw where young people changed and really became different people as a result of being in that environment as well. So I think for a coach, I think all of these coaches, whether it's Burgess, Barrett Parody, Nick Robinson, Quincy Lewis, they're pretty familiar with what's happening at BYU and what goes on. I don't think that learning curve is going to take very long. They have full awareness of that. So that won't be an adjustment for them. But, for Chris, he'll see things with a different lens, even when he is an assistant coach. And he'll have those conversations with Tom Omo and Brian, who oversees men's and women's basketball. And I think that transition won't be very difficult for any of them, nor certainly Chris, who's been in the program.
Steve, we appreciate the time. Thanks for your thoughts on this. You're the guy who's actually sat in that chair, so it's interesting to hear from you. We appreciate it, and we'll talk to you again next week.
All right, buddy. Bye-bye. See you guys.
There's former BYU basketball coach Steve Cleveland joining us here on The Zone. When we come back, get you up to speed on what's happened in the first 3.5 hours of this show. If you've missed it, a little golf, a little baseball, a little basketball, a little football too. Stay with us next.
The NHL is coming to Salt Lake City.
It's about time.
I have been waiting decades.
This is huge news.
As Utah prepares to welcome the National Hockey League.
This city has long deserved a second pro squad.
The Zone will have all the coverage from every angle as we'll be with the new team every step of the way. From every moment of the offseason right up to when the puck hits the ice in the fall.
A new era in Utah sports.
Your home for the best coverage of the NHL in Utah is right here on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
DJ PK, it's 97.5 The Zone. Time to get you up to speed on everything you missed during this show. It's brought to you by Siegfried and Jensen. No, it's not. That's a lie, isn't it? Look at Yak shake his head. You're so disappointed in me, Yak. I read the wrong line. I mean, I know. It's all me. 9 a.m. Slacker Radio headlines brought to you by Tim Dahle Mazda Southtown. Find your new Mazda at the south end of the valley. Tim Dahle Mazda Southtown. That's Tim Dahle Mazda Southtown in Sandy.
We do love our guys at Siegfried and Jensen.
We do. But I just
wait.
read the wrong line.
You're telling me that we're supposed to like Ned Siegfried?
Yeah, maybe not Ned. I mean, but
Mitch, on the other hand.
No, Ned's a good dude. Did you see his, this is a little side note.
Side note.
I think it was his grandson. Was it the last home game?
No, I didn't.
Okay, well, his son-in-law works for the Jazz, right? He's a sales guy. We know him.
Uh-huh.
And so they showed him, and then right in front of him was a little kid that I assume was Andrew's son going thumbs down on a call.
Got to raise him young. He wasn't around from Dick Bavetta, but
I don't know for sure, but I think that might be Nick's, not Nick, Ned's grandson.
Ned's grandson. Yeah.
I had Nick Robinson on the mind.
All right, well, why don't we pick it up there with the coaching search at BYU? We just heard from Steve Cleveland. We heard a lot of what he thinks, and it seemed from the beginning there are 3 candidates. Now there are more candidates beyond that. I suppose how far do you want to take it out? But Mark Madsen takes his name out, and I think Chris Burgess checks a lot of boxes. But, man. The one he doesn't check hasn't been a head coach. How often do Big 12 schools hire people without head coaching experience? And then if that's what Tom Homo really values, then Barrett Peary's sitting right there. You know, he's been a head coach in the Big Sky.
Okay, did Roy Williams have head coaching experience?
When he went to Kansas? No. And Bill Guthridge didn't when he took over North Carolina. I mean, there's plenty of examples. You don't have to have it. I think people often want it, but it's not a must. It's not. So it depends on.
Did Kyle Whittingham have head coaching experience?
No, but I also think it's different in basketball than in football. I think in football it's less. I actually read a thing where the demands of the NIL and the transfer portal on Power 5
bomb Pearl Harbor
or
have dinner with him, whatever that quote was.
Stop! You're mangling that movie line. That now you're better off being a coordinator at a Power 5. If you want a Power 5 head coaching job, you're better off being a coordinator at a Power 5 school than a head coach at a G5. That the demands and the programs are switching.
And the money will be better.
So, but I think at basketball, because there's 362 Division I jobs, it's more expected. But you're right, it's not a lock. It doesn't have to be that way. And certainly Tom Homo and Brian Santiago can do whatever they want. And maybe they want Burgess. And Burgess checks a lot of the boxes.
He does. I think the good thing is that these guys got some candidates out there that are worthy and are deserving.
There are no locks. We've been over that a million times.
No.
So the question is, do you have a pretty good vibe about where it goes if you give the reins to this person? That's the best you can hope for.
I do. If they went with either of these two guys, I'd support it 100%.
It seems like they will go with one of these two guys. I know there's some other names out there, but it seems like it's one of those two guys, doesn't it? Now, Yak was saying that Burgess had a furlong lead. It was those two. It was probably another 2 furlongs back to the third guy.
Yeah.
You think it's closed, Yak? You got a vibe?
To a degree.
Well, I've been texting throughout the show, and all of a sudden, when I asked for sort of a decision, I've been stonewalled.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Shocking.
You're in, but you're not that far in.
The reason why I think
You don't get to know that. You get to know a lot.
But I'm not gonna hurt the process. Go ahead.
well, the reason for the Burgess hire, I think, is because he has the relationships with the roster already, having recruited a lot of those guys.
Yeah, I mean, you can't get caught up in that.
Well, if you want to keep it together, though, don't you want to?
Right, but that's just short term. Those guys will be gone in 2 or 3 years either way. You're looking for a 10-year head coach. I get you don't want to blow off now because it looks like they got a good thing going. You want to retain as many of the guys as possible, as much as the roster as possible. I understand that, but
rosters change so fast, you can't put everything on that.
If you're intent on hiring Coach A, and 2 or 3 of these kids say, "Yeah, but I want Coach B." The point I'm making is you can't let these kids who are in the program for a short time have a significant say in
what
who
happens,
you end up hiring.
And because in that case they're having a significant say over what happens over 5 or 10 years. Probably.
Yeah, right. Ideally.
I mean, we see what's happened at Utah State. Guys can get hired away.
It's a tricky situation there. You know, when Urban resigned, I think guys like Scally and some others went to Chris Hill and said, "Hey, Kyle's your guy." And Kyle was the guy.
Mm-hmm.
But it was an easy decision that Kyle was clearly the guy. It was an absolute 100% no-brainer that he was the guy.
He was plan A, but he was also plan B, which is why Chris ended up bidding against himself. And although that, the numbers at those times, blew a lot of minds, in Chris's mind, it was like, yeah, and if I don't do this, then what kind of money am I spending? What kind of results am I getting? That's way more expensive than throwing another 50 or 100 grand at Kyle.
It was the right decision.
It's 20 years later, we're not debating that.
No. Against all odds, I thought he'd be a miserable head coach.
You did not. Literally no one did. Everyone's chomping at the bit. Cougar fans would have been super excited to get him. Everybody thought, as much as you can know, everybody thought this is going to work with Kyle.
He was ready.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's what I think both of these guys are. I'm not sure how old Peary is, but Chris has got to be
44.
Yeah, that's the sweet spot because you've been in the business now for a number of years, but yet you still have many, many years to go if you so choose.
He could coach 15, 20, 25 years if he wants.
Right.
And you're really hiring for 5, 10 tops. There just aren't that many coaches that are going to stay on the job more than 10 years. And it could happen, and Kyle did 20. But honestly, if whoever they hire now did what Pope did, 5 years and left the program in a better place than he found it, great.
Barrett Peary's 53.
And that's still young.
Still
enough.
plenty young
I
enough.
was gonna say,
Again,
that's right.
you're hiring for 5 to
Still.
10 years, and the guy can coach 15 easy.
Yeah, for sure.
So a couple more boxes they both check.
I'm excited for whoever they choose. And they will. I think they'll have one by Wednesday at the latest, and because they full well know this is a no-brainer, about the transfer portal, and they're expediting it as much as they possibly can. I have been told that repeatedly.
Because it's obvious they need to, and Tom Holmoe isn't going to whiff on obvious stuff like that.
And then you got Saunders putting his name in yesterday. You got Hall did it. What did he do it Friday or Saturday? Whenever he did it. And Khalifa did it.
Is
right
it
around
3
the
guys
same
in
time.
the portal now?
3 new ones. They already had Marcus Adams in there previously.
Yeah, I don't really count him.
Yeah, the 3 that really matter are the 3 that went over the weekend.
Right. And so you've got that situation there, and they'll get this thing done. And I think Tom has a good track record of hiring quality. He was the one who pushed for Bronco, and he was right. He was absolutely right.
And Dave Rose?
I think Dave Rose was sort of a no-brainer. But yeah, he did hire him. But I also think it was the
A lot of people would have hired him.
obvious Kyle Whittingham-like hire.
Is it like drafting Scotty Scheffler?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he was the guy.
Yeah.
And Dave didn't want to risk it. I've told this story, but this is a funny story. I call him up, and he saw my phone number, and he didn't want to answer
it.
But he clicked it, but he didn't click it all the way.
So you didn't hang up.
No. So he's driving in the car because I could hear the radio.
You can hear the car noise, right? Yeah.
I'm just going to sit here until he uses the phone next. He's going to have to talk
Your
to me.
stubbornness paid off.
So I just had the phone sitting there. It was at least a half hour, if not longer. But I just sat there. Figured, he's going to pick up that phone at some point, and I'm going to be here. And he didn't want to jinx it. And I've known Dave forever, and I get it. And so I don't even know if I quoted him, but because he could trust me. And he got the job. And that's another guy. He had head coaching experience at junior college like Steve Cleveland, so I guess that doesn't really count to a degree. But if they think Chris is the guy, I wouldn't be caught up in that because it's not like they can go get somebody who has Big 12 head coaching experience. They're limited because of the obvious so-called, I want to say restrictions, I'll say parameters.
DJ and PK, when we come back, your feedback next. Stay with us.
And it's all over almost here.
Don't go nowhere.
DJ and PK, it's 97.5 The Zone. Our question in the morning, what are your emotions now that the Jazz season is over? And Caden says, I'm looking forward to seeing what the offseason brings. Hopefully a rebound into purple for starters. And I'm eagerly awaiting this fall for the Jazz and for the NHL to start again. Ditch the black and gold, bring in some talent, and get back to the games. Caden's a pretty good fan. I think Ryan Smith would like Caden's outlook here. Sarge, good riddance. Phenom, I'm just glad it's over.
Yeah.
Nate, I could not be happier. Now we can talk about football, hockey, and baseball. I can't stand to watch the Jazz anymore. So not everybody's sharing that optimism from Caden. Plenty of people bitter. They have had enough.
I'd say frustrated.
Scott says, I watched less than 10 games this year. Most of those were early in the season. We went to one in person. It was disappointing. Aside from the ridiculous ticket prices, the team was a disorganized mess. We paid hundreds of dollars to see them get schooled by the Hornets.
Ooh, they lost to the Hornets?
It was so long ago, I can't even remember that game.
Ugh. Man, that can't happen. A lot of pressure on this management to get this thing going here. I think the honeymoon period with Ryan Smith is going to wear off real soon.
He'll take the heat, not Danny Ainge.
Well, I think it wears the
tag
buck
team.
stop.
Yeah.
If I own it and I allow you to run it, so
It does go back to the owner.
yeah. And they all know this. And then nothing I'm telling them, nothing I'm saying that's brand new. These guys, they know it. They want to win. I have no doubt about that.
Utah pheasant hunter at a nobody in BYU. I remember when I used to know every player on the team. Now I couldn't tell you who the starters are. If I saw them on the street, I wouldn't know that they played for the Jazz.
I think there's some truth to that, especially when they went through so many different lineups and they sat everybody and anybody at the end. That kind of sucks, you know? I mean, when you're ending your season in late February, that's awful.
Yeah.
But you got to hold on to the thought that there'll be better days. There will be better days. It's just how many years is it going to take to get to that better days? Or those better days.
Well, nobody knows who the players are. They're not really out there the way they used to be, but people don't consume media the way they used to be either. Everything's changed. I don't think those days are coming back.
I think the good thing is that we know LeBron and Bronny are coming.
Good one.
Second round pick. Get him here.
Yeah.
Steve, so we have 2 more years of tanking to protect these picks. 2024, top 10 protected pick. Top 2025, top 10 protected pick. Top 2026, top 8 protected pick. All to ship off Derek Favors' contract? I can't do 2 more years of this bleep.
Yeah, but then the other picks start kicking in.
Picks they got from the Cavs and from the Minnesota Timberwolves.
Right. So that should mitigate that at some point here, you would think. Which is why they're going to have the pick this year, and then the other picks start rolling in consistently now through the rest of the decade, right? I'd have to look to see exactly, but my mind says
they're
that's what
mostly
they
stacked into the odd years. I remember that. 25, 27, and 29.
Well, what's next year?
25.
There you go.
Yep. Yeah, I think the odds are way better than not that next year is going to be a long year with a lot of losing. Can't guarantee it. Maybe something will come along and they'll pounce and it'll be a trade, but I don't see what it is. I don't really see a hint of anything on the horizon. But hey, maybe one of these guys will improve dramatically. It'll be that internal improvement
that
gets them
multiple,
going.
not just one.
No, that's probably true. You got me there. All right. Let's see who else has got a little feedback here. There's so much negativity. Joe, I'm pretty hungry. I'm not going to lie. A breakfast burrito sounds amazing.
What's that have anything to do with?
What are your emotions now that the Jazz season is over? Joe's hungry. His way of blowing them off, I guess. Ignoring them. Brian, Eye on Utah, says, first time since the Jazz arrived in Salt Lake that I didn't watch 1 minute of Jazz basketball.
I don't buy it.
Life-changing. Hashtag bring back the Millers.
I don't buy it.
Even if it was a highlight somewhere, you watched a minute? TV,
You didn't watch
social
1 minute.
media. 1 minute of one game.
What level of into it were you before? If you were living and dying, there's no way you get completely out. If you weren't living and dying, so be it.
It was exciting when they went 16-4 over 20 games. I just don't view that as a fluke. I mean, they broke it up. They made moves. Is it a hot streak and where there's some breaks built in, the schedule's soft, or when you play a good team, you miss guys.
But Fontecchio and Olynyk shouldn't have made that big of a difference.
Well, it was compounded by the fact that after they traded those guys, they started sitting guys too. And they gave those time to, players who hadn't been playing in the league. I get your point. I mean, those are nice players, but they're not that powerful.
Yeah, wherever they went, they didn't make any big difference. Detroit and Toronto.
But they didn't have anything behind them, and they sat other guys.
Well, they just took too long to unleash Kenny Lofton Jr.
guys will remember the 23-24 season by Kenny Lofton Jr.
The unleashment of Kenny Lofton Jr., yes.
20 years later, he's the new Ben Hanlogton.
No! 20 years later, he's the new letter carrier.
Now people are hitting us up. It's over. When did the season begin? Thanks, Ward. The Jazz had a season? Torres.
They'll have a season again. Just sit tight.
DJ PK, we'll have a show again tomorrow. Jake and Ben will have a show next. Stay with us.